Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. My first night as a police officer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, started like any other shift, except it would be the night that changed everything. I remember checking my gear in the locker room, making sure my uniform was perfect. Fresh out of the academy, I wanted to make a good impression on Officer Mike Davidson, the veteran I'd be riding with. The evening air had an unusual heaviness to it as we started patrol. Mike was going through the basics: radio codes, common spots for trouble, local personalities to watch for. But something felt off. There were more emergency vehicles than usual racing through the streets, their sirens echoing between buildings. "Dispatch seems busier than normal tonight," I mentioned, trying to sound casual despite my growing unease. Mike nodded, his weathered face illuminated by the dashboard lights. "Yeah, lots of medical calls. Probably that new flu strain they've been talking about on the news." He didn't seem concerned, but 20 years on the force had given him an unshakable composure. The radio crackled. "Any available units respond to 1847 Maple Street for a domestic disturbance. Multiple 911 calls reporting screaming and possible violence." Mike reached for the radio before dispatch finished. "Unit 417 responding." He flipped on the lights and sirens, and I felt my heart rate spike. My first real call. As we turned onto Maple Street, I noticed how quiet the neighborhood was. Too quiet. No kids playing in yards despite the warm spring evening. No dog walkers, just dark houses with curtains drawn tight. The address was a modest 2-story colonial. All the lights were on inside, but something about it made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the front door standing wide open. Maybe it was the broken window on the second floor. Or maybe it was the blood, dark smears on the white door frame that gleamed under our spotlight. "Stay alert," Mike said, drawing his weapon. "Something's not right here." We approached the house, our footsteps seeming too loud on the concrete path. The porch light flickered, creating dancing shadows. A woman's scream pierced the night air, followed by a crash from inside. Mike took point as we entered, our flashlight beams cutting through the gloom. The living room was a disaster. Furniture overturned, family photos scattered across the floor, their frames shattered. The metallic smell of blood mixed with something else, something rotten that made my stomach turn. "Police, anyone here?" Mike called out. No response except for strange shuffling sounds from upstairs. We cleared the first floor room by room, finding more signs of violence but no people. Then we heard it, a wet, gurgling sound from the kitchen. I swung my light toward the noise and froze. A man lay face down on the linoleum, surrounded by a pool of blood. But he was moving, twitching in a way that seemed wrong, unnatural. As we watched, he started to push himself up, his movements jerky and spastic. "Sir, are you all right? We're here to help," I said, moving closer despite every instinct screaming at me to run. Mike's hand grabbed my shoulder. "Wait." His voice was tight with tension. The man's head snapped up at the sound of my voice. His face, his face. The skin was gray and mottled, his eyes cloudy white except for pinpricks of red where pupils should be. His mouth opened in a snarl, revealing teeth stained dark with blood. He lunged at us with impossible speed. Mike shoved me back and fired 2 rounds center mass. The impacts knocked the man back, but he kept coming. It wasn't until Mike's 3rd shot caught him in the head that he finally went down. The gunshot seemed to trigger something upstairs. Multiple sets of footsteps thundered above us, accompanied by inhuman shrieks that made my blood run cold. "Back to the car now," Mike ordered. But it was too late. Dark shapes appeared at the top of the stairs, moving with that same unnatural jerking motion. Their eyes glowed red in our flashlight beams as they started descending. I could hear more of them coming from other rooms. We were about to be surrounded, and somehow I knew these things weren't human anymore. Not really. My first night on the job had just become a nightmare, and it was only beginning. Mike's training kicked in before mine did. "Kitchen, back door," he shouted, grabbing my collar and yanking me backward. Those things were pouring down the stairs now, their movements a horrifying mix of jerky and fluid, like broken marionettes with cut strings. I caught glimpses as we retreated. A woman in a torn nightgown, her neck a mass of raw meat. A teenage boy missing half his face. They moved faster than they should have, much faster. Their fingers curved into claws as they reached for us. The kitchen's fluorescent lights flickered, casting strobing shadows that made everything more disorienting. Mike slammed the door between us and the main house, but there was no lock. "Help me," he growled, already shoving the refrigerator. I threw my weight against it, and together we managed to barricade the door just as the first impacts hit from the other side. "What the hell are they?" I gasped, my academy training feeling woefully inadequate. "Later," Mike snapped. "We need to—" He was cut off by the sound of breaking glass. One of them had circled around, crashing through the kitchen window. It was an elderly man in blood-soaked pajamas, glass shards protruding from his skin as he crawled through the frame with inhuman determination. Mike's pistol barked 3 times. 2 chest shots did nothing, but the headshot dropped the old man instantly. "Headshots only," he said grimly. "Remember that." The radio on Mike's shoulder crackled to life. Dispatch was going crazy. Multiple reports of violent attacks across the city. Officers down. Medical personnel overwhelmed. Request for SWAT deployment at Lancaster General Hospital. We could hear sirens in the distance, so many they blended into a continuous wail. Through the kitchen window I saw flames rising from somewhere downtown, the orange glow reflecting off low clouds. The door behind the fridge started splintering. They were going to break through soon. "We make a run for the car," Mike said, checking his magazine. "Stay close, don't stop for anything." I nodded, gripping my Glock so tight my hand hurt. The back door opened onto a small patio, then about 30 yards of open yard to the street where we'd parked. It seemed like miles. Mike counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. We burst out into the night. The cool air hit my face, carrying the smell of smoke and something else, something rotten and sweet that seemed to come from everywhere. Movement caught my eye, more of them emerging from neighboring houses, attracted by the gunshots. Halfway to the car, I heard Mike curse. 3 figures lurched out from behind a parked van, cutting off our path. They wore hospital scrubs, their faces and chests dark with dried blood. One was missing an arm, the ragged stump swinging as it ran towards us. Mike dropped the first one while I stood frozen. The crack of his pistol snapped me out of it, and I managed to put down the second one. My hands were shaking so bad I burned through half a magazine before landing the headshot. The third one reached Mike before he could switch targets. They went down together, rolling on the asphalt. I heard him scream as teeth sank into his shoulder. Training kicked in. I lined up the shot carefully, even as my heart threatened to burst. One round right through the infected's temple. It collapsed on top of Mike, who shoved it off with a grunt of pain. "I'm bit," he said as I helped him up. His voice was flat, emotionless. "We both know what that means." "No," I started to say, but more of them were coming. The noise had drawn what seemed like every infected for blocks. We could see them shambling out of houses, emerging from behind cars, all moving with that same terrible purpose. We made it to the patrol car. Mike slammed into the driver's seat while I dove into the passenger side. The engine roared to life just as the first bodies started hitting the vehicle. Rotting faces pressed against the windows, bloody hands leaving smears as they clawed at the glass. Mike threw the car in reverse, then forward, plowing through the growing crowd. Bodies thumped against the push bar and rolled under the wheels. I caught a glimpse of a child-sized figure bouncing off the hood before forcing myself to look away. As we peeled away from Maple Street, I could see the scope of what was happening. Cars abandoned at odd angles, people running, screaming, more fires breaking out. An ambulance lay on its side at an intersection, its lights still flashing, dark shapes moving inside. "Dispatch, this is Unit 417, Mike called in, his voice strained. "We have a situation." He broke off into a coughing fit. Even in the dim light, I could see he was pale, sweating heavily. "All units," dispatch responded. Their voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Multiple reports of mass casualties and violent attacks throughout Lancaster County. CDC confirms outbreak of unknown pathogen. National Guard has been mobilized. All available units respond to evacuation centers at following locations." Mike switched off the radio. "Listen carefully," he said. His breathing was becoming labored. "Whatever this is, it spreads through bites. I've seen enough movies to know how this ends." "We'll get you to the hospital," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. He shook his head. "No time. The fever's already starting, I can feel it." He pulled the car over suddenly, putting it in park. "You need to handcuff me." "What? No!" "Do it," he barked. It was an order, not a request. "I've got maybe minutes before I'm not me anymore. Once you secure me, take my spare magazines and get to the station. They'll need every officer they can get." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my cuffs. Mike turned in his seat, putting his hands behind his back. As I closed the restraints, I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "One more thing," he said quietly. "When it happens, when I turn, you know what needs to be done. Don't hesitate. Don't let sentiment get you killed." I wanted to argue, to deny what was happening, but the sounds of chaos were getting closer. More sirens, more screams, more gunshots. The world was coming apart at the seams, and my training officer, my mentor, was about to become one of those things. The night was far from over. I sat there in the patrol car, watching Mike's condition deteriorate. His skin had taken on a grayish tinge, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. The handcuffs clinked softly as tremors ran through his body. "Get out," he wheezed. "Now." "Mike, Now!" The word ended in a wet cough that sprayed blood across the dashboard. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. They were already starting to cloud over, red spreading from his pupils like blood in water. I grabbed his spare magazines, radio, and shotgun from the rack. As I stepped out of the car, a woman ran past screaming, pursued by something that moved with that terrible, broken gait. I raised my weapon, but they disappeared around a corner before I could get a clear shot. The Lancaster PD station was 18 blocks away. Might as well have been 18 miles. A violent thud from inside the patrol car made me jump. Mike was convulsing, slamming against the door. His face was changing, skin pulling tight across his bones as his jaw worked soundlessly. I couldn't watch anymore. I started running. The city had descended into chaos in less than an hour. The eastern sky glowed orange from multiple fires, and the air was thick with smoke. Car alarms wailed in an endless chorus. Every few seconds, gunshots would crack through the night, sometimes single shots, sometimes bursts of automatic fire. The National Guard had arrived, but from the sounds of combat, they were losing. I moved from cover to cover, trying to remember my tactical training through the fog of panic. Check corners. Watch roof lines. Keep moving. A municipal bus had crashed into a convenience store up ahead, its emergency lights still flashing. As I approached, I could hear sounds coming from inside, wet, tearing noises punctuated by what might have been chewing. I gave it a wide berth. The radio crackled. "All units, be advised. Lancaster General Hospital has been overrun. Medical personnel are..." Static consumed the rest. When it cleared, a different voice was speaking, higher pitched, desperate. "They're inside the dispatch center. The doors won't hold. Oh God, they're..." More static, then silence. 2 blocks later, I encountered my first group of survivors. 4 people barricaded inside a small coffee shop. They'd pushed tables against the windows and were armed with makeshift weapons. An elderly man with a baseball bat waved me over. "Officer, thank God!" He started to pull one of the tables away. "Let us out!" "We need to." "Stay inside," I cut him off. "Barricade the door, don't make noise, don't let anyone in unless they can prove they're not infected. But the evacuation centers are probably overrun by now." The words tasted like ash, but I knew they were true. "Just to stay put until help comes. If help comes," I didn't add. A scream split the night, Close, maybe just around the corner. The old man's eyes went wide. I could see the others in the shop shrinking back from the windows. "Good luck," I said, and kept moving. The next few blocks were a blur of horror. An infected police officer, someone I recognized from the academy, feeding on what was left of a teenage boy. A minivan full of trapped civilians, the windows covered in bloody handprints from the inside. A woman cradling a baby, both of them so still, so pale. I had to stop twice to vomit. The sounds of fighting grew louder as I approached downtown. Automatic weapons fire echoed between buildings, accompanied by the deeper boom of explosions. A military helicopter thundered overhead, searchlights sweeping the streets. Something must have caught the pilot's attention because the chopper banked hard and opened up with its door gun, the sound deafening in the urban canyon. I was 3 blocks from the station when I heard engines approaching. A convoy of 3 SWAT vehicles roared past, headed toward the heaviest fighting. The last one screeched to a halt when the team spotted me. "Get in!" a tactical officer shouted, extending a hand from the back doors. I was about to accept when movement caught my eye. A mass of infected was pouring out of a parking garage, drawn by the noise. They moved like a dark wave, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, all driven by the same terrible hunger. "Behind you!" I screamed. The SWAT team opened fire, but there were too many. The infected swarmed the vehicle like ants taking down a much larger prey. I saw the tactical officer who'd offered to help get dragged out into the street, his screams cut short by snapping teeth. I ran. God help me, I ran. The sounds of dying men followed me down the street as I sprinted for the relative safety of a narrow alley. More infected were appearing now, converging on the sounds of combat. I pressed myself into a doorway, trying to control my breathing, trying not to imagine what was happening to the SWAT team. When the screaming finally stopped, the silence was almost worse. I stayed in that doorway for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, watching shadows move past the alley entrance. My radio had gone completely dead. The gunfire in the distance was becoming more sporadic. The helicopter was gone. Lancaster was falling. I checked my ammunition, 2 full magazines for the Glock plus Mike's spares, 6 shells for the shotgun. Not nearly enough if I got caught in the open. The station was still 2 blocks away, but the streets were filling with infected. I needed another way. That's when I remembered the maintenance tunnels. They connected most of the major buildings downtown, including the police station. During academy training, they'd made us memorize the layout in case we ever needed an alternate evacuation route. I found an access point behind a dumpster and pulled up the heavy metal cover as quietly as I could. The darkness below seemed absolute, but it had to be better than what was happening above ground. As I lowered myself into the tunnel, I heard a familiar sound that made my blood run cold, handcuffs clinking rhythmically, accompanied by that distinctive shuffling gait. Mike had gotten loose, and somehow, he'd found me. The maintenance tunnel swallowed me in darkness. My flashlight beam seemed pathetically weak, creating more shadows than illumination. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and stagnant water, but underneath was something worse. That same rotting sweetness I'd noticed above ground. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, each splash echoing like a gunshot. The tunnel stretched ahead of me, a concrete throat leading into blackness. Behind me, I could hear Mike descending the ladder, the handcuffs creating a horrible rhythmic clicking. I had 2 choices: run deeper into the tunnels or face what used to be my training officer. The decision was made for me when I heard other sounds joining Mike's pursuit. More shuffling feet, more inhuman groans. The infected from above ground had followed us down. I moved as quickly as I dared, trying to remember the tunnel layout from training. The main passage split into 3 branches ahead. The right fork led to the courthouse, the middle to the hospital, and the left towards the police station. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see bloody handprints on the walls. Someone else had tried this route. The sound of rushing water grew louder as I approached the junction. Part of the tunnel system doubled as storm drains, and with all the fire trucks operating above, water was pouring down through the grates. It had created shallow pools that reflected my light in broken mirrors. I took the left fork, moving faster now. The sounds of pursuit seemed to be falling behind, but in these tunnels, sound played tricks. An echo could make something seem distant that was actually right behind you. The passage narrowed, forcing me to hunch slightly. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping rust-colored water. I tried not to think about whether it was actually rust. The air was getting worse, thick with decay. Each breath felt like I was swallowing something unclean. My light caught movement ahead. Rats, fleeing from something. Dozens of them, their eyes glinting as they scurried past me. In my experience, when rats run, you should too. I broke into a jog, splashing through puddles. The tunnel began to slope upward, which was good. I was getting closer to the station. But the incline also meant that sound would carry better from behind me. That's when I heard it, a wet gurgling sound that might have been my name. Rook. I froze. That voice. It was distorted, inhuman, but I recognized it. Mike was trying to speak. Help me. My hand tightened on the shotgun. Training said to run. Training said that wasn't Mike anymore. Just something wearing his face. But 20 minutes ago, this man had been teaching me, protecting me, sacrificing himself to save me. The beam of my flashlight shook as I turned around. He stood 30 feet behind me, his uniform dark with blood and other fluids. The handcuff still dangled from one wrist. He'd torn his hand through the other cuff, leaving mangled flesh and exposed bone. His skin had gone gray-green and his eyes, God, his eyes were solid red now. Mike, I whispered. I'm sorry. He cocked his head at the sound, then his mouth split in a terrible grin, revealing teeth that had somehow sharpened. The thing wearing Mike's face launched itself forward with that unnatural speed I'd seen before. I fired the shotgun. The blast was deafening in the confined space, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating the tunnel like lightning. Mike staggered but kept coming. I pumped and fired again, and again. The third shot took him in the face. He went down hard, sliding forward through the shallow water to stop at my feet. I stood there shaking, ears ringing, the smell of cordite mixing with the tunnel's rot. For a moment there was silence except for the dripping water. Then I heard it. More splashing sounds. Many sets of feet moving fast. The shotgun blasts had drawn the others. I started running, not bothering with stealth now. The tunnel curved left, then right. My lungs burned as I pushed harder, faster. The sounds behind me grew louder. How many were there? How many rounds did I have left? Light appeared ahead, fluorescent glow spilling down from above. The access ladder to the police station's basement. I'd made it. I reached the ladder just as the first of the infected rounded the corner behind me. No time to count them in the darkness. I slung the shotgun over my shoulder and started climbing, taking the rungs 2 at a time. Hands grabbed at my boots. I kicked out blindly, felt something crack beneath my heel. Keep climbing. Don't look down. The access hatch was just above me. I slammed my shoulder into it, praying it wasn't locked. Metal groaned, then gave way. I pulled myself up into fluorescent-lit hallway of the station's basement. Below me, the infected clawed at the ladder, creating a horrible screech of nails on metal. I grabbed the heavy hatch cover and swung it down hard, crushing the fingers of the nearest infected. Their howls echoed up as I spun the locking wheel, sealing the tunnel. I collapsed against the wall, gulping air that didn't smell like death. For a moment, I just sat there, shoes and pants soaked, hands shaking as the adrenaline began to fade. That's when I heard the gunfire upstairs and realized my journey wasn't over yet. The basement hallway of Lancaster PD felt surreal after the tunnel. Too bright, too clean, too normal. Training photos still hung on the walls, including one of Mike teaching defensive tactics. I forced myself to look away. Gunfire erupted upstairs again, followed by shouting. I recognized Lieutenant Chen's voice. "Fall back to the armory, move it, people." I checked my weapons, 3 shells left in the shotgun, 2 magazines for the Glock. Not much, but better than nothing. The stairs leading up creaked under my wet boots as I moved toward the sound of fighting. The first floor of the station was a war zone. Desks had been overturned to create barricades. Shell casings littered the floor, glinting under emergency lighting. The air was thick with gun smoke and that now familiar smell of infection. "Coming in," I shouted, not wanting to get shot by my own people. "Officer Adams from Mike Davidson's unit." "Adams? Get your ass in here." I sprinted across the squad room toward the armory, where about 15 officers had established a defensive position. They'd pushed filing cabinets across the hallway and were taking turns firing through the gaps. Beyond their barricade, shadows moved in the darkness where the emergency lights had failed. Lieutenant Chen pulled me behind cover. Her uniform was splattered with blood and she cradled a tactical shotgun. "Where's Mike?" "Dead," I managed. "Turned. I had to." She just nodded. No time for grief now. "What's the situation?" "Bad," she said, pausing to fire twice down the hall. "Hospital fell first. Then Fire Station 3. Dispatch is gone. National Guards pulling back to set up a quarantine perimeter." She gestured to our makeshift fortress. "We're trying to hold here, protect the civilians in the vault." I hadn't even thought about the vault, a reinforced safe room where we kept sensitive evidence. Smart thinking, using it as a shelter. "How many civilians?" 23. Mostly people who ran here when things went bad, including some of our families. Her voice caught slightly on that last word. I knew her husband and daughter would have been home when this started. A rookie named Torres called out from his position. "They're coming again!" I moved to a firing position, finally getting a clear view down the hall. The infected emerged from the shadows like a nightmare. Police officers still in uniform, civilians in torn clothing, even a firefighter still wearing parts of his turnout gear. All sharing those horrible red eyes. We opened fire together, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. I aimed carefully, remembering Mike's last lesson. Headshots only. Each pull of the trigger dropped another infected, but more kept coming. They crawled over their fallen, driven by mindless hunger. "Running low," someone shouted. Someone. Others echoed the warning. Chen cursed. "We've got maybe 10 minutes of ammo left then." She was cut off by static from the radio room. A voice broke through, military from the sound of it. "Napalm authorized for Sector 7. All units clear the area. Repeat. Clear Sector 7 immediately." Chen grabbed her radio. "This is Lieutenant Chen, Lancaster PD. We have civilians in the station. Request immediate evac." Static hissed. Then, "Roger, Lancaster PD. 1 transport helicopter available. Can you reach the roof?" "Affirmative," Chen lied. The stairs to the roof went through the corridor currently filled with infected. She turned to us. "All right, people, 1 push, everything you've got left. Clear that hall and get our people to the roof." I thought about the civilians in the vault. Children, elderly, wounded. They'd never make it without protection. I looked at my fellow officers and saw the same determination in their eyes. This was what we'd signed up for, even if we never imagined it like this. "On 3, Chen said, shouldering her shotgun. 1, 2. The power chose that moment to fail completely. Emergency lights sputtered and died, plunging the station into darkness broken only by muzzle flashes and the red eyes of the infected. What followed was chaos. We charged forward in the dark, firing and reloading by feel. I emptied the shotgun, switched to my pistol. The infected pressed in, trying to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Someone screamed as teeth found flesh. I felt hot breath on my neck and spun, firing point blank into a face I half recognized from the front desk. Somehow we pushed through, clearing a path to the stairs. Chen organized us into a convoy. Civilians in the middle, officers front and back. We could hear the helicopter approaching as we climbed. The roof access was chained shut. Officer Reynolds blew the lock off with his last shotgun shell. We spilled out into pre-dawn air thick with smoke from the burning city. The helicopter was already waiting, rotors whipping up debris. Chen directed the evacuation, sending civilians first. The infected were close behind us, their howls carrying up the stairwell. "Last group, go!" Chen shouted over the rotor wash. "Adams, you're with them. What about you?" She smiled grimly and held up a grenade. When had she gotten that? "Someone has to make sure they don't follow. Get those people to safety, rookie. That's an order." I wanted to argue, but the civilians needed protection. I climbed into the helicopter as the first infected reached the roof. Chen pulled the pin. The explosion rocked the helicopter as we lifted off. The roof erupted in flames, taking Chen and the infected with it. She'd given us the time we needed. As we rose above the burning city, I could see military vehicles forming a perimeter. Beyond that, an endless stream of headlights as people fled into the countryside. The sun was rising, painting everything in shades of blood and fire. My first night as a police officer was over. I'd lost my mentor, my lieutenant, and any illusion of how safe our civilization really was. But I'd survived. We'd saved some people. Maybe that would have to be enough. The radio crackled with reports from other cities. This wasn't just happening in Lancaster. The nightmare was spreading, and it was only the beginning.